currently serve as the director and international public spokesperson for a global grassroots effort called 9/11 Whistleblowers, whose purpose is to show that there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft, but that the aircraft were electronically hijacked through employment of a system called the uninterruptible autopilot that enables a remote source to take complete control of the aircraft autopilot and flight management computers and fly the aircraft to its target. Now, once this system is engaged, the pilots can no longer disconnect it. We have a website at 911pilots.org and a YouTube channel at 911 Pilots if you'd like additional information on the hijacker's background or this experience. Now, for myself, I commenced flying over 50 years ago in 1968, first as a civilian pilot, then as a U.S. naval aviator, and finally as the United Airlines commercial jet pilot. And over a span of a 35-year career, I flew over 20,000 flight hours in 15 different aircraft. And I can unequivocally say without reservation or embarrassment that I could not have flown the profiles on 9/11, and neither could the hijackers. I have today with me Captain Hadi Rizvi, who lives in Karachi, Pakistan, who has an extensive background in flying. And I'd like to thank you for joining me for the interview today, Hadi. Okay, could you tell me what year you commenced flying?
I started somewhere in 1966. I think that was around September of 1966, which made me just a little bit short of 17 years of age. Today I'm about 72. And if I don't count my gliding experience, which was about 2 years before that, so I I did my training for the Air Force, did about 24 years with the Air Force, and then joined the airline. And the next 25 years, I was with the airline. And the next 3 more years, I was with the flying club as a chief flying instructor teaching people. So flown from, let's say, from a Cessna to a Mirage to a Jumbo, just name it. I've flown most of it. The F5, the freedom fighter that you call it. Took part in the war with our enemy in the 1971. I was a young flight lieutenant, about 23 years old at the time. And well, if I know anything, I should know flying, all kinds of flying.
Yes, you should. And you were a Pakistan Air Force wing commander, is that correct?
That's right. I took my release as a wing commander and joined the airline after that. In fact,
Oh,
I actually joined the airline and then left the Air Force. The Air Force was kind enough to give me no objection to join.
wonderful, wonderful. And you flew in 2 wars?
No, just one. The
Just one
71.
war.
That's
What
right.
aircraft did you fly during that war?
What they used to call the last of the real fighters, the F-86. The
Ah,
saber.
yeah, yes. And how many flight hours do you estimate you've had?
I have around close to 17,000 hours. And this, of course, people who've been flying in the Air Force would know that you really don't do too much of flying in the Air Force in terms of hours. You may have more sorties, but each sortie is about 35, 40, 45, maybe an hour maximum. Whereas you start flying the airline, you just go up and down New York and you've done more than 20 hours.
Yes, yes, I know that. Uh, how about your education background?
Well, did my basics, what you call the A levels, and joined the Air Force at the time. In the Air Force, I did my graduation, and later on, I even did a little bit of law after leaving the Air Force privately, basically trying to study aviation law. And apart from that, I've done my war course and a lot of courses the Air Force make you do, which are basically certificate courses. And that includes an accident investigation course plus hands-on accident investigation experience, aircraft accidents.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, with those credentials, Hadi, you certainly would qualify as an expert witness as a pilot. Would you be willing to testify under oath on camera before a federal grand jury or in a court of law if you're asked to do so sometime in the future?
Yeah, I don't mind as long as if you're talking the truth. I don't mind talking the truth. It doesn't matter. I think
Okay, well, let's start off with the Pentagon profile. and Hani Hanjour, the 29-year-old Saudi Arabian hijacker who came to the States in the mid-90s, took a little flight training and went back to Saudi Arabia. Then in January 2001, 9 months before 9/11, he returned to the States and attempted to re-enroll in the school that he was enrolled in before, and they would not accept him because he was such a poor student that the first time he was there, they didn't want to waste resources on this guy. So he supposedly piloted American Airlines 77 that struck the Pentagon, and that aircraft approached from the west and commenced a 270-degree descending and accelerating corkscrew turn to you're shaking your head, to arrive at almost near the surface without striking the ground or a wingtip, and managed to strike the Office of Naval Intelligence at over 500 miles per hour. Now this maneuver was replicated in a flight simulator by some very experienced pilots, and without exception, when they tried the maneuver, with one exception, when they tried the maneuver, they crashed the simulator, and the one exception being a very experienced Boeing 767 pilot that managed to hit the building after his 20th attempt. Now, Hadi, given that, do you believe that these inexperienced hijackers could have flown the flight profiles that day? And if not, why not?
Actually, you said it all. I mean, this 9270, it is called, is a difficult maneuver at that speed and height, even in a fighter aircraft. To accurate. To do it on an airliner, I mean, forget the experience. Even an experienced guy is able to do it. Plus, I mean, there are certain natural laws that cannot violate. I mean, if you were to leave something in the air, it will fall down because there's gravity. Similarly, in aviation, there is a law called, people who know about flying, which is the ground effect. So if you're flying close to the ground and the air is disturbed, it hits the ground and comes back and hits the aircraft. The faster the speed, more the ground effect. Anybody can tell you that. And what surprises me that the whole 9/11 inquiry does not have an expert pilot, experienced pilot, to tell them anything about what is happening. So the aircraft, even on autopilot, is not possible to have been flown at that height and speed. What
Yeah.
is
Could,
wrong? This is what I've been taught. This is what I learned. In fact, any lawyer will tell you that if your testimony one odd perjury, the whole testimony is scrubbed.
yes, yes. Could you have flown them yourself?
I don't think so. It's not possible. The aircraft can't do it. That big an aircraft, I told you to start with, it's a difficult maneuver in a fighter aircraft.
Yes.
The smaller, the ground effect is lesser, of course. You can fly low level at pretty fast speeds. But in an airliner, no way. It's just not.
I agree with you.
Possible.
I agree with you. Now, you've flown as little airplane as a Cessna 172 or a Cessna 150 up to a 747 aircraft. Could you describe basically the differences between a 172 and modern commercial jet aircraft?
Of course. I mean, a jet, bigger the aircraft, it's not that maneuverable. And you can't just turn around like the turn that I saw on television, the one that's hit the second tower in New York. It's not easy to make that kind of a sharp turn on an airline. It is more stable. It doesn't sort of, get out of its normal route just like that. And at higher speeds, it's that much more stable. So these are things not possible. I learned my aircraft investigation through American books, the NTSB books and others that we used to use at that time. And they highlighted every rule. The first rule is that you need to, order an inquiry of experts, people who are into it. And you just, people who didn't know anything about it. And it was all over the media before you knew anything. And obviously, the mass doesn't understand. They think what is being told to them is right. But this is an impossible. All the four, almost impossible. I don't believe it. With, it's about an hour gap or so between the first and the last. And yet, highest defense forces in the world could do nothing about it. I mean, this is everything is, I don't know. And then the debris of whatever aircraft is crashed, wherever it is crashed, is a very, very sort of clueful debris. It must tell you what has happened. And we just removed all the debris, pushed it into some kind of a tanker, and sold it off to China. So what I don't know if it's right or wrong, but the fact is that the debris was never examined, and
Yeah.
people who are supposed to have actually, talked about what is happening, the experts. Even in the court case, if there is, something to do with medicine, they call a doctor to find out as to if the medicine was right or the surgery was right. I don't think any pilot was called up for any inquiry in the official
They
or any
they
mission
were
that they.
not. They were not. There were no pilots that are permitted to testify before the 9/11 Commission. As a matter of fact, they started out with the assumption that these pilots had, in fact, piloted these aircraft. Hadi, would you agree with me that the reason 99% of the global population fell for this ludicrous story that these pilots flew the airplane is because they're not pilots and they cannot relate to the absurdity of it?
Obviously, I mean, you are shouting so much over the media that nothing else can be heard. And you and I know there are two forums uh, who are actually not really freely coming on media. They're not allowed, I guess. The pilots for 9/11 Truth Commission and the engineers for 9/11 Truth Commission. And I look at it like this, that, buildings have been on fire before and after 9/11 also. The skyscrapers. None of them has ever fallen down.
Right, right,
Two buildings just gone down and gone down as if, they've been just brought down their own footprint. And
right,
one of them just fell, it was not even hit. I mean, this is crazy. And the
right.
whole public has to believe it.
Uh, Now, I started off talking about the uninterruptible autopilot that allows a remote source to take control of an aircraft's autopilot and flight management computers and guide it to its target. Now, given the navigation systems on these aircraft are derived from cruise missile technology, and the fact that we know 3 airplanes hit the building and that these pilots couldn't have flown it, do you think it's entirely feasible that these aircraft were remotely controlled through the uninterruptible autopilot?
Definitely remotely controlled, because that accuracy is not possible. I mean, you and I, we've flown. It's not very easy to look down into a city and find out where you are unless you've been there many more times and looking out for these things. Detect these buildings with that speed and height, with that tension, you're going to do something wrong. It's not, you're not totally free to just, think on your own. So this has to be obviously, and that's why I say there were initially reports about something smaller hitting the Pentagon. In fact, the pictures that came out first, right in the beginning, the hole that was made in the Pentagon was much smaller than the diameter of the fuselage of the 757 or 767 that went in there. And later on, of course, the whole thing fell down, so there was nothing left. But so it is, I mean, a jumbo aircraft cannot fly 400 plus knots or 500 plus miles per hour at 20 feet. It just cannot. If somebody can show it,
Exactly.
I can take my hats off. I say, okay, fine, you can do that. A jumbo cannot fly.
Right, right. I agree. And there's never been a criminal investigation into 9/11. Most people believe that the 9/11 Commission was a criminal investigation, but it was not. And pilots are demanding their day in court to testify under oath to state the impossibility of these pilots flying these aircraft. And we're going to attempt to do it. We presently have an investigation going on with the FAA, and we're working directly with, although they don't represent us, with the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry to move this before a federal grand jury in New York, if possible. So if you're,
Somebody find out the truth as to why did it happen. I mean, there are so many other things. I mean, I will not say they were right or wrong, but like news keep coming out. I heard, I read somewhere or through emails or whatever that these very buildings were reinsured about 6 months before, and a sabotage or a sort of a airplane crashing into it was part of the coverage that was given to it in
that's
millions of dollars.
that's
And
correct. That's correct.
find
Uh,
these things